All right, so somebody's got a drug problem. They end up in jail because they get caught doing some nasty drugs, or they're selling nasty drugs, which means they're perpetrating it on other people. And are we supposed to coddle these guys and get them off drugs? Is that really a role of government? Tell me why rehabilitating somebody in prison for their drug habit I should pay for.
Well, I think because it's good public policy. I think there's a lot of bang for that buck. So, I mean, recognizing that, and I don't know how you feel about it overall, John, but I don't know by any marker that we can say that we're winning the war on drugs, right? We're not winning in terms of reducing supply, reducing use, or any of that kind of. This is a strategy that we've had for decades, and we're not making a dent. What makes a dent is when people don't use to begin with, so prevention strategies, and when people go from being very heavy users to entering into recovery. That's the ultimate outcome. And so whatever strategy it takes to get us from point A to point B is effective public policy, and that's where we should make our investments. Prisons don't promote recovery, right? You can get drugs in prison.
Why should prisons promote recovery? That's my question.
I have an idea.
I think,
go ahead.
And you know what this is like. When you talk to Republicans about this idea, the immediate reaction is, well, we don't have room for that touchy-feely stuff. We're not here to help these people. We're here to get them off the streets. And I sympathize in a large part with that point of view.
Let me tell you why you should care, and that is because it costs you as a taxpayer in your pocket, because the person who's addicted to meth will burglarize homes. They will forge checks. You as a business owner maybe have an employee who has an issue, who steals from you. Your kids may be buying drugs from these people who still see it as a regular way of life. So ultimately, if we don't help people get to a different pathway, and I agree, this coddling thing.
There's a whole lot of steps there. Let's focus in on what I think is most measurable, which is the state budget. Are you telling me that if we give money to people who have drug addiction problems, that it's going to cost me, the taxpayer, and only from the tax point of view, less money in the long run?
When we're looking at $28,000 a year for a prison bed versus what it might be for treatment, and you hold people accountable. I mean, this is not about saying, here, take this check and go find yourself a therapist. That's not what the issue is. But it is holding them accountable for getting control of their problem. That person who has a drunk driving situation may be someone who kills your family or friend. So it is, there is gain in it for you, and there's gain in it for the state, because ultimately we're not going to fix people. It's up to them to figure it out. But where are we spending our money wisely? And we're not doing it on certain kind of prisoners in our system right now.
Do either one of you recognize the danger when we say sentencing reform? You know, the immediate, depending on your point of view, on one side, sentencing reform might be good. We're going to help these problem people get the service that they really need. From a different point of view, conservative guy go, we're going light, and we're going to make the world more dangerous. Let's take that view for just a second. If somebody who has a drug problem is out and he relapses, he can hurt people. And he can hurt people that I love. Right. And therefore, isn't it safer to keep them locked up? Well, even if it costs 28 grand a year.
Well, you can't. I mean, we can't afford, if we were to lock up everyone in the state of Colorado who used illegal drugs or who was using illegal drugs, we would be bankrupt in 10 seconds. Because it's prevalent. It is a prevalent problem in our society, and particularly in Colorado. And so this notion that we can just lock our way out of this problem is delusional. It's not possible. And not only that, but it isn't a matter of, you know, we can lock them up, but the reality is they also come out. And so when they come out, right, there was one of my favorite quotes is from the first warden of a female warden of a federal prison, who back in the 30s said to Congress, she said, gentlemen, we must recognize that those prison doors swing both ways, because too often we have talked about sentencing people and getting them off the streets, and have spent very little time crafting public policy around when people come out and what does successful reentry look like. Because right now we have about 50% of people released from prison who will not be successful and who will go back to prison, and the majority of them will not be successful, not because they committed a new crime, but because they violated a condition of parole.
Condition
they'll
like
go
what?
back.
Give me an example.
Well, when you're on parole or probation, for that matter, there are a lot of conditions. So you'll have to report to your parole officer. You'll have to probably drop drug screens. You'll have to have a job, a place to live, pay fines, fees, costs, restitution. You may have curfews, areas, restrictions, all sorts of conditions. And if you violate any of those conditions, you can be sent to prison, and you can be sent to prison for a long time for violating a condition of either probation or parole.
So it's not that.
Because we're not talking about sentencing
reform. They committed a crime again. It's that they've been released either early, they've been put out on probation or on parole. They've got all these rules. You got to be home at this amount. You got to visit your parole officer on Thursdays at 2 o'clock. You can't see this particular person. Any one of those violations gets back into prison.
And the thing that's important to understand is when we talk about looking at reform of the criminal justice system, because the Commission has a really important charge, which is reducing recidivism. Right, which is the failure rates within the criminal justice system. It hasn't even looked at sentencing reform as a strategy. State after state is looking at these failure rates on what they call community supervision, so your probation, your community corrections, and your parole, particularly for what is known as these technical violations. And state after state is finding that they can have very significant impact in reducing recidivism, which by definition promotes public safety, by looking at supervision strategies that are more effective. And that's where the Commission has spent a lot of time, is aligning practice with research. And that's why I think they're going to do some really powerful things.
Talk to me in my language, okay? All right.
You're from Jersey?
We want to do what's right for the person. We want to help them get off drugs. Fine, that's lovely. Talk to me dollars and cents. We're facing this massive budget shortfall, even after RefC. And now we've got to find all these corners. If somebody is not a threat, I'm willing to have this discussion about getting them out of prison as long as they are still being punished. But tell me what we can save by doing this, and how do we make those decisions? I mean, how big of an issue is this? I know the Pew Center just put out a report saying that 1 in 100 people in America are now behind bars. Did I get that one right?
Yeah, they just released a new report 2 weeks ago that said 1 in 31 adults is under some form of criminal justice supervision.
So out of every 30 people, one person is either in jail or on parole or some sort of work release or doing community service or something like that.
Yep.
Holy, yeah, which means only 29 more to go.
Right. And a couple of points. One is what the legislature has done over the last 20 years with something called mandatory sentencing. So hard to speak in plain English on that, but basically if you commit this crime, you will get this punishment. And the judge is not allowed to factor in any additional circumstances. Mandatory sentencing doesn't give a lot of leeway to look at each case individually. So we're putting people away who maybe are the really bad guys versus the ones who you go, wow, that person did that for X, Y, or Z reason. Should they really get the same punishment? So mandatory sentencing is something we need to not necessarily eliminate, but look at where are we applying that and does that make sense? Another thing the Commission's been looking at just recently is the number of mentally ill, those with mental health problems, and a lot of times it's called co-occurring disorder. You have the mental health issue along with drug or alcohol issues. And as our country really has moved away from mental institutions, mental hospitals like we knew it, they don't exist anymore. The
whole one flew over the cuckoo's nest institution really doesn't exist anymore.
But those folks still do. You know, and they are our friends and our neighbors and our family. So the fact is they are out in our communities, but they are oftentimes, and it's not necessarily, there's all gradations of being mentally ill, but a lot of those folks—
Working in the Capitol, you would know this.
I absolutely know it, and many are certifiable, and probably myself as well. But I would say that they're not in these single institutions, but what we've done is we've moved them to the correctional facilities.